Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. So, my condolences on these sad occasions of passing of Prophet Muhammad and the martyrdom of Imam Hassan Mujtaba alayhi salam and Imam Rida alayhi salam, and also extend my condolences to our dear brother Ryan Kandur for the loss of his kind father. So please recite Surah Al-Fatiha for all marhumin, all believers, with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawm الدين. So inshallah we'll commence our program tonight with the recitation of the Holy Quran, and inshallah after the Quran we'll benefit from Shaykh's inshallah lecture. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا ووالد وما ولد لقد خلقنا الإنسان في كبد أيحسب أن لن يقدر عليه أحد يقول أهلكت مالا لبدا أيحسب أن لم يره أحد لم نجعل له عينين ألم نجعل له عينين ولسانا وشفتين وهديناه النجدين فلاقتحم العقبة وما أدراك ما العقبة فلاقتحم العقبة وما أدراك ما العقبة فك رقبة فك رقبة أو إطعام في يوم ذي مسغبة يتيما ذا مقربة يتيما ذا مقربة أو مسكينا ذا متربة ثم كان من الذين آمنوا وتواصوا بالصبر وتواصوا بالمرحمة أولئك أصحاب الميمنة أولئك أصحاب الميمنة والذين كفروا بآياتنا هم أصحاب أصحاب المشأمة والذين كفروا بآياتنا هم أصحاب المشأمة عليهم نار مؤصدة صدق الله العلي العظيم. الصلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأجل فرجهم غفر الله لنا ولكم إن شاء الله. So please welcome Sheikh Shafiq to the member inshallah with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. اللهم صل على محمد
here as we mark this anniversary at the end of Safar, the month of Safar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a great deal of importance and respect to the Holy Prophet of Islam. The greatest of Allah's creation to ever walk on this earth was Rasoolallah. And the greatest of Allah's creation who is referred to as khayr khalqihi was the Prophet of Islam. And if you look at the writings of numerous sociologists or individuals over the thousands of years that humanity has been around, there has been an effort to identify and to determine and to define what makes a person perfect. And the definition has varied far and wide as to what is the definition of a perfect individual, of what would be referred to in the Arabic terminology as insane kamil, the perfect human being. A lot of discussion has taken place. A lot of people have written about it. And a lot of people have tried to define what makes a person perfect. Is it his stature? Is it his color of skin? Is it his height? Is it his physique? Is it his language? Is it his complexion? All these things have been debated, discussed, and all that. And there has not been any sort of unanimity or agreement as to what has been the definition of the perfect human being. And you will find that Confucius, one of the philosophers from thousands of years ago, he gave a very interesting definition of what defines the perfection of a human being. He writes, he says that the perfect human being is somebody who is a highly valued individual, who is disciplined. And a lot of people have written about the concept of discipline to reach towards perfection. And so when Confucius writes that it's a high valued individual who has got discipline, and he writes something very interesting. Confucius mentions something interesting. He says one of the qualities of somebody who is perfect is that they don't follow anybody. They do what they think is right, and they search out goodness and qualities in themselves, while somebody who is inferior looks for qualities in others. This is his definition. And interestingly enough, when I was pondering over this and I was preparing for the lecture, I was thinking, I said that he mentions one thing, that a perfect individual does not follow anybody else. He does whatever he wants to. He does whatever he thinks. Now here, there's a bit of a dichotomy here. There's a bit of a contradiction. If you agree with his statement on the definition of the perfect human being, you are following him, therefore you are not perfect. Because he is saying that you are inferior if you follow him. So the perfect human being cannot follow his definition of imperfection. And so it created basically a loop from which you cannot really easily get out of. Because if you're striving towards perfection, then you also will not be able to follow him, even though he says something about following and not following. Okay. Then I decided to refer to Ayatollah Google, because he's a marja who most people follow nowadays. Sadly, we have left Sayyid Sistani, we have left Sayyid Khamenei, we have left Sheikh Nasir Makarim. We have more trust and more reliability on Janabe Ayatollah Google than anything else. So I was saying, okay, let's see what he has to say. What is his fatwa on? Astaghfirullah, please understand that I am using colloquial sarcasm. And so his fatwa, or his definition, was somebody who is basically does not surrender, does not succumb to his wishes or desires, and he is somebody who is well disciplined, who is somebody who has got morals and values. So I was getting a little closer to what I wanted to search out. Morals and values, I see. And so when we're looking at and discussing all of this, then we look at now that we find that when one's height is not something that is within their control. One's complexion is not within one's control. So there are certain factors that are within our control, and there are certain factors that are beyond our control. We cannot control certain things, and we cannot determine certain things, and there are certain things that we can control and we can basically amend in ourselves. So when we look at and when we conclude that, there was a beautiful writing along the same lines by Ayatollah Murtaza Mutahari, which is called, he names his booklet, Insane Kamil, the perfect man. And in that, he uses a very interesting deduction. So while we have all of these other theorists and sociologists and philosophers giving their opinion on what is perfection, Ayatollah Mutahari talks about not only moral values and moral traits, not only the goodness in one's action, but he also complements it and commends one's belief system, one's aqidah, as a way of reaching perfection and having an inherent quality of perfection. That means that belief is there, action is there, both of them together go hand in hand. And he says that there is nobody more perfect than Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Ali Murtada. Because while other sociologists and philosophers and thinkers took a look at actions and one's discipline and one's ability to do whatever they want and not follow somebody, Ayatollah Mutahari Shaheed took it to a higher level and said that the first foundation begins with Iman, with Aqidah, with making sure you believe and you believe correctly. And that is why the Quran mentions that if you want to see this road towards perfection and closest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, very beautifully Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wal asr. He takes a qasam, he takes an oath. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath and says, wal asr innal insana lafi khusr. Everybody is in a loss. Everybody is in a khasara. Everybody is in a loss. Innal insana. Those of you, mashallah, are reciters of the Holy Quran, which I'm sure all of you are. You have studied the Quran, I'm certain. You have had an appreciation of Quran Majid, the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the direct verbatim narration from Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. In the Quran, you will find that, of course, all of the thousands and thousands of ayat are important. There's no ifs, buts, or ands. It is the word of Allah. So every breath, every letter is important, let alone the verses. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts certain emphasis on certain verses, and He does this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does it by putting alif, noon. Inni, innama, inna. And that's why you've got many verses that have, you will remember that. Innama amruhu idha arada shayn. Innama yuridullahu. And so you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whenever there's an alif and a noon with a shadda, there's extra emphasis here. Innal insana lafi khusr. Every man, every human being is in a loss. Now there's a blanket statement made by none other than the Almighty Creator. So we would have all been helpless. We would have all been basically in a state of anxiety, I'm sure, because we're all in a loss. And you know one thing, that anybody who has got accounting experience or background will tell you one thing, that first year of a business opening or first year of your job or first year of whatever you do, you might be in a loss. The second year, you might still be in a loss. From the third year onwards, if you're still in a loss, then you better look after opening another business. Better close the business. Because you cannot keep a loss sustained on an ongoing basis. So eventually you have to come out of that loss. That's what the accountants will tell you. And that's what they'll say, that otherwise there's going to be a problem. Unless you want some tax write-off or something, that's a different situation. But if normal human beings, normal people are trying to do a business in order to, inshallah, get some benefits, get some nafa, get some barakah, get some rizq increase. So when Allah Ta'ala says, all of insan is in a loss, we would have felt helpless. We would have said, oh, what do we do? We cannot now stop being insan. Can we? Like I said, certain things are in our control. Being an insan is from Allah's order. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Innal insana lafi khusr. Then He gives us a little bit of an exception. He gives us a time, a chance, and an opportunity to come out of this sphere of khasara, of loss, and says, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. He puts an illa in there. He puts an exception. Beautifully, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts an exception in there. And please do not think that I'm doing a tafsir of Surah Asr or any other. I am not a mufassir, I am not a commentator, I am not an alim, I am just a student of Bismillah, and that is about as far as I can go. And even if I can be a student, inshallah, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. So Allah Ta'ala is giving an exception by saying what? إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. The first two prerequisites of somebody who is not going to be in a loss, who is now making progress, is آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Belief and correct actions. Notice the wording and the terminology that Allah Ta'ala uses. It's not إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا خَيْرٍ. No. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. The amal that is required for that particular time. There are certain deeds that may be required in a certain place that cannot be applicable in another place. There are certain actions that are required in a certain situation that cannot be required in another situation. Just to give an example for my youngsters who are here, I know this is the last weekend before your school will start, so mashallah, I see a lot of you here. Some of you have got anxiety, some of you get the worry on your face. I understand. I was in school once as well, and I wish I was back as well. But khair, I'm too old for that now. Actually, you're never too old to learn. Keep that in mind. Khair. I need to move on, otherwise I will get diverted and we'll be here till Fajr time, and I don't want to do that to you because I'm sure you have got things to do. One salawat upon Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. If you want to take a very simple example of Amilus Salihat, for example, I come here and I tell my dear brother, you know, yesterday I did Salatul Layl. And I did Salatul Fajr at awwal time. I did my Salatul Fajr, my Namaz Fajr at awwal time. I'm telling him that because I want him to think, wow, Brother Shafiq did something. Yes, yes. And he'll say, MashaAllah, Brother Shafiq. Don't do this, Khair. And so I am doing the what? Now what happens to my Salatul Layl? Gone. What happens to my Salatul Fajr? The thawab gets as close to zero as possible because I did it to impress him, not for the sake of lillahi qurbatan ilallahi ta'ala. You see? And so what happens is my deed is out the window. Now let us say my dear brother here, he knows that Brother Shafiq doesn't do his Salatul, he doesn't recite Salatul Fajr, he makes his Salat Qadha and all that. And you came to know about it. And, because Brother Ali, uncle, he has known me since I was little. So he thinks that, I need to put something in Shafiq's head. So I will tell him that it is very important to do Salatul Fajr at awwal time, or Salatul Dhuhr at awwal time, or Salatul Maghrib at awwal time. That's where you give the azan, the thawab is there. A lot of times, I tell my students in Kitchener one thing. You have those Kahoot games and all that. You have the question. And then you have to put the answer, the right answer. You've played that, right? You've seen it. I don't know if you guys do it here or not. Our kids have done it? Yeah. Oh, you have? Okay, alhamdulillah. So you know what I'm talking about. But that was during the time of marhum COVID, right? Okay. It's not marhum yet. It keeps rising from the cover. I don't know. Allahu alam. Anyways, so when you have the question and you're about to give the answer, the faster you give the answer, the more points you get, right? So if you were, now make sure it's the right answer, eh? Because if it's the wrong answer, it doesn't matter how many points you're going to get. So if you have the right answer, and the faster you give it, the more points you get. Well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, thousands of years ago, gave us the same formula. The closer to awwal time you do your salat, the more points you get. Those points are known as thawab from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more thawab you get. Allah ta'ala already gave us this. Mr. Kahoot came later on. Allah ta'ala promised us this already. The closer to awwal time you do your salat, the more thawab you get. So he is telling me, you should do salat. I did my salat at awwal time, so maybe you should. His intention is to correct me. His intention is to improve me. My intention was different. The same action. I'm talking about my salat. I'm talking about my ibadat. His intention is the same. He's talking about his salat. He's talking about it. In my case, my amal becomes zero. It becomes negated. In fact, I might be committing a sin. In his case, he is getting thawab for it. His ibadat increases. That is the definition of amilus salihat. The same action in one situation makes our deeds negated. In another situation, it amplifies. Same thing. That's the difference between amal khair and amilus salihat. The Quran says that those who do amilus salihat, what is required for that time. So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us that this is the importance of iman and action, and the correct action. Not necessarily the action we need to do or we want to do. And you can see in the example of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. In the time of Imam Hassan, a peace treaty was needed. There needed to be some negotiation with Muawiyah, the accursed, alayhi la'an. And in the time of Abu Abdullah, a force needed to be gathered to confront Yazid head on. To confront Yazid head on. So the issues were different, the situations were different, and therefore the action that was needed at that time was not needed this time. You know, sometimes Orientalists have written that, oh, it was because Imam Hassan was very calm, very peaceful, very quiet. He didn't want war, he didn't want problems. Imam Hussein, na'udhu billah, was hot-blooded. He wanted to fight that. You know something? Those of you who have studied history, those of you who know your biographies of the Imams, in what year did Imam Hussein become Imam? Uh-oh. This is going to be a test. Historical test. No geography, just history. In what year did Imam Hussein become the Imam? At the Shahadat of Imam Hassan. Now the question is, what year was Imam Hassan's Shahadat? Uh-oh. No, don't use your phones, please. Those who know me, they know that I do various tests. I just don't mark them. But I have different little tests. Imam Hassan was shaheed, was martyred in 50 Hijri, which then made the imamat of Imam al-Hussein Abu Abdullah alayhi salam in 50 Hijri. The events of Karbala took place in 61 Hijri, correct? If I'm wrong, correct me. Now, this is your time. So that means for 11 years, well, 10 years and a bit, Imam Hussein was already the Imam, but there was no battle. So those who write that Imam Hussein was hot-blooded, it would have been better to have the battle 50 years in 50 Hijri than in 61 Hijri. Because you guys know one thing, as we age, we become more frail. While we're young, we've got the power. While we're young, we have the strength. When we get old, mashallah, all of you are young, so you know how, mashallah, youth is. When you get to my age, you can't do all the things you used to do 10 years ago, right? And so Imam Hussein should have fought at that time if he was, na'udhu billah, God forbid, hot-blooded and that. So that means that that was not a case of one's nature or hot-bloodedness. It was what was required by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that time. Muawiyah was a deceptive person. Yazid openly flaunted the laws of Islam. So coming back to what we were saying, that amilu salihat wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr, that they are the ones who encourage each other towards haqq and they encourage each other towards patience. To be patient. And so when we look at how the definition of Shaheed Mutahari in his book Insan Kamil is, he says that the perfect example, somebody who can be emulated, somebody who can be followed, was none other than the Holy Prophet of Islam, Hazrat Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then right alongside Rasulullah was none other than Amir al-Mu'mineen wa Imam al-Muttaqeen. Examples of the most sublime human beings whose lives were replicating what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. How beautiful. You know, we are taught in the du'as. My dear sisters and brothers, my youngsters especially, there's a beautiful dua we are told where we recite, in which we are supplicating, we are beseeching Allah, that, oh Allah, you are exactly how I want you to be, oh my Creator. Make me how you want me to be. La ilaha illallah. You are exactly how I want you to be. The merciful, the forgiving, the almighty, the all-knowing, everything. Allah is there. Ya Allah, make me how you would like me to be. How beautiful it is. And that is the example of Rasulullah. How his patience, his forbearance, his perfection resounds till today. That even those who were not fond of the Prophet had to acknowledge that the qualities of the Holy Prophet were exemplary, were followable. When the Prophet first announced his message, he is asking the elders of Quraysh, he's asking the kuffar of Quraysh, all of those old people, when he was just 40 years old, a youngster, and he was asking them that if I told you that there was an army behind the mountain, would you believe me? They said, Na'am ya Muhammad. Yes, Muhammad, we would believe you. He asked them, if I told you that army was ready to attack, would you believe me? They all said, Na'am ya Muhammad. Yes, we would believe you. Then he asks them, why would you believe me? Why would you believe me? He said, they all replied in unison, because, oh Muhammad, since you were young, we have never heard you tell a lie. Allahu Akbar. Can I make a claim like that? Can I say something like that? That no, I've never lied to you, so you have to believe me. You will look at me and say, Brother Shafiq, you joke all the time. You have told lies. We know you. Those of you who have known me since I was little, you know me. You know what destructions I used to do in various communities. And so, you say, this is not a followable trait. Maybe now you might be better, but sometimes in some cases, many people think I'm worse. Okay, alhamdulillah. But the Prophet had an impeccable reputation. Impeccable. And that is why when Amirul Mu'mineen, the loyal follower of Rasulullah, his own perfection was such that people weren't sure. People were still debating and wondering whether this is a human or whether this is a God. And so the Imam says, you are considering me so high. You're considering me like the Prophet. No. I am the slave of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Salli ala Muhammad. How beautiful the example of the Prophet is. One of the things in a dua that we mention, dua makarimul akhlaq. One of the duas of Imam Zain al-Abidin, whose Shahadat we had marked in Muharram, this last month, on the 25th. Imam left behind a beautiful legacy. One of the most beautiful duas that, at least in my opinion, is dua makarimul akhlaq. The pinnacle or the peak of moral values and traits. And in that dua, at the very beginning, we are asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, oh Allah, the Imam starts out with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. So beautiful. Almost every dua of Imam Zain al-Abidin in Sahifa Sajjadiyah, Sahifa Kamila, Zabur ala Muhammad. There are 3 terms for this book that the Imam left behind. Almost every dua starts with salawat, ends with salawat, and has got salawat in between as well. The reason for this, when the Mufassirin, the commentators had mentioned, he said that, when we have supplications, when we have some needs, we want something to be accepted, we have to use the right channel. We have to use the right medium. A lot of times, my youngsters will not appreciate one thing. My elders, my father's generation remembers one thing. When they had to pay bills, and this is actually a true story, my father is still like this. When he has to pay a bill, he will use an envelope, a postage stamp. He'll put the stamp on, write the check, and then mail it out. And the company gets it after 2 or 3 or 4 days. With Canada Post, it might even be a week or a month or... Okay, I don't want to go into that discussion. Nowadays, everybody whose modern technology is up to par, up to date, they'll all do this online. But if you were to come with me in those days, that you had to put a stamp on and mail the letter, and you had to make sure you use the right stamp, a stamp that has not already been used, a stamp that is correct. A lot of times people used to have hobbies whereby they would collect stamps and bills, notes, and coins from different places. I still have, people think that I'm still from the dinosaur age, not even from Hazrat Adam's age. They think that I have a stamp collection, I have a coin collection, and I have a bills collection. Not worth much, but it's still there. And I remember, whenever I would go somewhere, I would buy stamps there. And I was thinking, should I use that stamp here and see if it goes through? And I actually tried it once a day. It was RTS, return to sender. I said, what happened? And the post office told me this is the wrong stamp. This is from another country. This is from the Middle East, or this is from Africa. You need to use a Canadian stamp in order to get that letter from one Canadian destination to another. You remember those days of stamps? You remember, right? You can still buy them, alhamdulillah. Now, I didn't understand that. The postman will only take it if you have the correct amount of postage and the correct stamp. And so the Imam is reminding us, and the Imam is teaching us, that this salawat that has come from the Quran and Majid is like the postage stamp. We want our supplications to get to Arsh Azam. We want our supplications to get to the whole Ilahi, the whole throne of the Almighty Creator. In order for that stamp to be there, in order for the Malaika to take our message to Allah, the stamp is Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. This is the postage stamp that will guarantee that our letter will reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our message will reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine the station of the Prophet. Imagine the maqam of the Prophet. How pure the Prophet is. That today if somebody wants to come from kufr, from disbelief, to iman, they have to take the name of Allah and they have to say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And that is not complete until and unless they say, Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasoolallah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Their iman is not complete. Their iman is still not yet done. They have to take the name of the Prophet. That's how pure the name of the Holy Prophet is. How sublime the name of the Holy Prophet is. And the Quran, unfortunately, we as Muslims, and alhamdulillah, not us Jafari Muslims, but some of the Muslims are still debating, oh, the Prophet was unlettered, the Prophet was illiterate, the Prophet was, well, where's your dalil? A man goes to Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salatu wasalam, and he says to the Imam, why did Allah appoint an illiterate person as the Nabi? The Imam says, who says my grandfather was illiterate? He says, the Quran is saying it. Imam says, show me where in the Quran that it says the Prophet was illiterate, na'udhu billah. Where the Prophet was illiterate. He says, Surah Jumu'ah, هو الذي بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم. Allah is the one who from the illiterates raised up. The Imam says, why are you reading only half a part of the ayat and not the entire ayah? And the commentators, the mufassirin of the Quran, went on to explain. He said that there are a number of meanings of what ummi is from the Quranic perspective. Number one is that the people were illiterate in that era. The people were jahil. From amongst the people, Allah Ta'ala raised it. That's one opinion. That doesn't mean that the Prophet was illiterate. The people were illiterate, and from amongst them, Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala raised. The other group of mufassirin, the commentators have said, and if you look at Nur al-Quran, fi tafsir al-Quran, you look at the writings of Allama Tabatabai in his Al-Mizan, Ra'atul Nasir Makarim's Al-Amathal, Tafsir al-Namuna, you'll find the explanation of all of these. The area that the Prophet was from in Mecca was known as al-Qura. And that area of al-Qura, the people were just known as Ummi. Not that they were illiterate, but the people of al-Qura were known as that. Anyways, but the Imam says, read the entire ayah. هو الذي بعث في الأميين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة. His job was to teach you the kitab and the hikmah and the wisdom. How can somebody teach you if they themselves are illiterate? Na'udhu billah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala. The Prophet was the pinnacle of knowledge, of ilm. Every Imam says that our knowledge has come from our grandfather Rasulullah. Amirul Mu'mineen says that I am the one who learned everything I've got from Imam. This is the same Imam who says, Saluni, Saluni, ask me. You want to ask me about the heavens? You want to ask me about the depths of the oceans? Ask me any question about the heavens and the earth and I'll be able to answer you. Where did that knowledge come from? From Rasulullah sallallahu. Every Imam dedicates every point of their knowledge to Rasulullah. And so here the Imam says, read the ayat properly. Don't just judge the ayat. Don't use your mind to interpret the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What a prophet we had. My youngsters, people ask you, show us, tell us some of the examples of the Prophet. There was a time, I'll share one thing, a couple of small stories, inshallah, before my time is up, inshallah. There was a time where one poor gentleman comes to the Holy Prophet, brings a bunch of dates, brings a small threshold of dates, gives it to the Prophet. And this poor man, everybody wanted to give some gift. Everybody wanted to give something to Rasulullah for what the Prophet had done. The Prophet eats the grapes. He has one, he has two. The other companions are sitting around. The Prophet is eating the grapes, until the entire bunch is finished. The entire bunch is finished. He does not offer to anybody else. He finishes it. The poor man who brought the dates, he was really happy. He was elated. He smiles and he leaves really, really happy. The other companions are wondering that this is completely different than what the Prophet is like. This is not normal. Afterwards, one of the companions has the courage to ask. He says, Ya Rasulullah, you have always shared everything with us, no matter who brought it. Whether it was a rich person, a poor person, this or that, whether it was something good, something medium, something mediocre, whatever. You always share. This time you ate all the grapes yourself, Ya Rasulullah. Why? The Prophet, after the man had already left, the Prophet says, I tried the grape. The grape was sour. It was not sweet. And I was afraid that if I offer it to you, one of you will make faces, one of you will make some comments, one of you will do something or say something that will humiliate that man, will degrade that man. He will feel bad that he gave sour grapes to the Prophet. In order to avoid that, I ate them all myself and not man and kept a happy face. Akhlaq-e-Rasul, the morals and etiquettes of the Holy Prophet. Then imagine that, sometimes if that happens to me, somebody brings me something, Oh, this tea you brought me was not cold, was not hot enough. There's not enough sugar. The food that you brought, too much salt. This you made for me, this dessert wasn't nice at all. I'll complain about things. I'll bicker about things. The Prophet says, I didn't want any of you to say something to hurt that man's feelings. Imagine the Prophet having the feelings of that poor man at the foremost of his mind. So that's why he didn't share. One time, Anas ibn Malik narrates. He says that I used to serve the Prophet for many, many years. And I knew the etiquettes and the style and the habits of the Holy Prophet. I knew. So he said at the time of iftar, he would have maybe 1 or 2 dates and a cup of milk. That was his iftar. And then later on at night, then he would have something to eat. And then he would have a very simple suhoor. And that was his iftar. So this is one night, the Prophet had gone away with some other companions. And I had kept the dates and the milk ready. Many hours passed. Seems like the Prophet might have he was thinking to himself that maybe the Prophet was invited for some iftar or something, he went away. So he said, I ate, Anas ibn Malik writes, I ate those dates and I drank the milk. I was about to rest when some hours later the Prophet came back. The Prophet came back. And I asked the other companions who were with him that, has the Prophet had iftar yet? Has the Prophet eaten yet? They says, no, he has not had his iftar. He had gone for some urgent work, so it's not that he had any invitation or anything. He had some work, and he's come back, he has not eaten. So Anas is now worried. The Prophet is hungry. The Prophet looks at Anas and realizes that there's some anxiety on the face of Anas ibn Malik. And he realizes that it seems like I'm not going to have an iftar tonight. And it seems like there's nothing to eat. And the Prophet, reading that, he reads it and says that, I'm not very hungry, I'm just going to go take some rest. Because, there was no 24/7 grocery stores. You guys, we have, mashallah, so many departments to grocery stores, convenience stores that are open 24/7. At the time in Medina, everything closed at iftar time. Everything closes, on a reasonable hour. So there was no food to eat. And so Anas was really worried. The Prophet read it. The Prophet went to sleep. He said, no, it's okay. I'm okay. Goes to sleep. Anas mentions, he says, never did the Prophet ever bring up this story, this episode. Never. Imagine if that would have happened to me, I would have told everybody, oh, last week I went to sleep hungry. Last Ramadan on the 25th day, I was hungry. I would be telling everybody that. Look what happened to me. I went to sleep hungry. The Prophet, Anas ibn Malik mentions, never told anybody. And the life of the Prophet was such that no matter where he went on an expedition, no matter where he went, the Prophet would do just as much work as the others would do. When they had to bring firewood, the Prophet would also be going out to get the firewood. When they had to prepare the meal, the Prophet would be involved in preparing the meal. They would say, Ya Rasoolallah, Ya Rasoolallah, you are the Prophet of Allah. Please, you take it easy. We will do the work. The Prophet says, it is my job to do just as much work as you are doing. It is not appropriate for me to do work and for you not to do work. And then the Prophet made sure that there was no racist caste system, his humbleness was something that was exemplary. When a foreigner would come to Masjid al-Nabawi, when they would come into the masjid, they would have to ask, Aina Muhammad? Aina Muhammad? Which one of you is Muhammad? Where is Muhammad? Because they would all be sitting together. The Prophet never had a special place to sit. The Prophet never had any special clothing to wear. The Prophet was exactly like everybody else. Imagine they would have to ask, a guest, somebody who was from outside, would have to ask, which one of you is Muhammad? That was the humbleness of the Prophet. And the bravery of the Prophet, again, is exemplary as well. When we look at the environment that we live in today, we find something very interesting. When we look at the history, we find the same thing. If you look at the events of Karbala, we are still in the month of Safar, still the month of Azar, still the month that we are marking and mourning Abu Abdullah, Imam Mujtaba, Imam Rada, the Holy Prophet in these end days of Safar. Allahu Akbar. Last week we had the Arba'een as well. I want to ask you one question. In all of the majalis you've listened to, and I also have a habit, I actually listen to sometimes non-Shias as well. I want to see what their perspective is, what their opinions are, and see what they have to say. And they talk about bravery, they talk about, shuja'at, chivalry, and how they're. You were remembering just last month, Muharram, the first 10 days, you had a visiting alim, a scholar. You read about and you heard about what happened on the plains of Karbala. On the day of Ashura, when the actual battle was taking place, have you ever read, heard, or come across any narration that says that Umar as-Saad was in the battlefield, that Hurmala was in the battlefield, that Shimr was on the battlefield, that Hasin ibn Namir was on the battlefield, and that they were noted for their bravery or for their chivalry? Do you find even one narration? Has any alim ever mentioned, has any historian ever said that? Yeah, Hurmala was there to kill Ali Asghar, a baby. He was there to shoot the mashk, the water bag of Abbas Alamdar, and to kill children who were on the battle. Yeah, I'm talking about on the battlefield, on the forefronts. Where were they? Where were they? Let me go back one step. I see my time is very, very quickly running out. Let me go back one step. One step. In Kufa, just a few weeks before this tragedy of Karbala, what happened in Kufa? Muslim ibn Aqil was being fought by thousands, not hundreds, of Ibn Ziyad's army. Ibn Ziyad. Yani the commander would repeatedly go to Ibn Ziyad and say, I need more soldiers, I need more soldiers. Muslim ibn Aqil was able to knock out all of them step by step, one by one, dozen by dozen, 100 by 100. Muslim ibn Aqil. Finally, Ibn Ziyad, alayhi la'an, Ibn Ziyad says, I have sent you to capture one person. I've already sent you thousands of soldiers. How many more soldiers do you need to catch one person? The commander replies to Ibn Ziyad, you're forgetting. We're not trying to capture an ordinary person. We are trying to capture the nephew of Ali ibn Abi Talib. We are trying to capture the nephew of Ali ibn Abi Talib. He has the courage and the valor of Ali ibn Abi Talib. The commander says, Ibn Ziyad, why don't you come and face him? Ibn Ziyad says, how many soldiers do you want to take them? He was in his palace, hiding in his palace, surrounded by his guards, bodyguards and everything. Hiding in the palace, running the show from there. Umar as-Saad was in his tent, surrounded by his bodyguards. Hasin ibn Namir, one of the commanders, one of the generals, Shimr, was also in charge of 1,000 contingent, just like Hazrat Hur was. And so Hasin ibn Namir also the contingent. All of them were in their tents on the day of Ashura during the battle of Karbala. I didn't understand this, because here we see Mawla Hussein was in the forefront. Hazrat Alamdar was in the forefront. Qasim, Muslim ibn Awsaja, Aun Muhammad, Zuhair Akain, they were all in the forefront. The Imam did not say, Ali Akbar, you stay in the tent. I don't want you to go out. Qasim, Aun Muhammad, stay in the tent. Everybody had to go into the battlefield, because one of the braveries and the examples we have got from Muhammad and Ali Muhammad is that we will be in the forefront, not behind in a tent or a project. I want you to understand this in today's terminology. I want you to understand this in today's terminology. Over the last few weeks, we have been reading that in Tel Aviv, the entire cabinet of the Zionists is under the bunkers. They are hiding in the bunkers. They have been staying there for days and days, anticipating some sort of resistance, some sort of attack. I didn't understand that until I read about Karbala, that the zalim and the oppressor will have a habit. They will stay protected, whether it's underground or above ground. And it will be those who have got the courage of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad who will be in the forefront, ready to lay down their lives and the lives of their families. Salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. That's why they are not known for their bravery and their courage. The people in the occupied territories, the people of the resistance, the people of Yemen, the people of Lebanon have been known for their courage and valor because they follow the example of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. That is what we have learned from the battlefield of Karbala. That is what we learn from the message of Rasoolallah. Don't shy away. When the need is there, we have to say, Labbaik, Ya Allah. When the necessity is there, we have to come to the forefront. We have to be prepared to give the sacrifices, because the Prophet taught us that without sacrifices, we will not reach that completion of the perfect human being. It's a journey for us. It's not a destination. Perfection is not a destination, my sisters and brothers. This is the last point I want to make before I come to the Messiah. It's a journey. If somebody says, I have reached perfection, immediately you know that that is imperfection. It is a journey that we go through until the end of our lives. How the Prophet's life was an exemplary life. How his akhlaq was an exemplary akhlaq. That even those who were poor and downtrodden were never given a chance to be humiliated. One time, Bilal was on the front. Bilal was in the field working. He was sweating. He was smelling. Somebody goes to Bilal and puts his hands on the eyes of Bilal and says, guess who? You know how children play these games? Immediately Bilal says, Ya Rasoolallah. And the Prophet asked him, Bilal, how did you know it was me? How did you know it was me? Bilal says, I am from Africa. My skin is dark. My smell is not pleasant. I am sweating because I'm working on the field. Nobody cares about us. Only one who would care is none other than the Rasul of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Prophet of Allah will love us, care for us, and do loving things like this, Ya Rasulullah. It was this Prophet who was the head of the household of the Ahlul Bayt. This was the Prophet. When anybody had a problem, when anybody had a difficulty, they would come to Rasulullah. It was this same Prophet when he left this world at the end of Safar, that people would still come to his grave and still convey their messages to him. It was this Prophet that before leaving from Medina, before leaving, Imam Hussein comes to the Prophet and says, Ya Rasulullah, the time has come that I had promised you that Hussein will lay down his life. Ya Rasulullah, the time has come. I have to leave the city that I was born in. I have to leave the city that I grew up in, the city that has been so beloved and so loved to me. I have to leave that city, Ya Rasulullah. And then we are told that after Arba'een, after the Jahlum had taken place, another group comes to Rawza Ya Rasul. Another group comes to the grave of the Holy Prophet and to the shrine of the Prophet. But this time it is not Hussein. This time it is not Abbas. This time it is Zainab-e Kubra coming to the Holy Prophet. Ya Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, Zainab has returned to Medina. Zainab has come back to Medina. Ya Rasulullah, but I have come without your Hussein. I have come to let you know and to give you condolences and to let you know that your Hussein has been martyred. He was made to be hungry and thirsty. For 3 days they killed him, Ya Rasulullah. Ya Rasulullah, they beat the children. Even Sakina was murdered in the Zindan, in the prison of Sham. Ya Rasulullah, they took our hijab. They took our chadars and made us to be paraded. We, the daughters of yours, your daughters were made to go through this humiliation and degradation. And at that time, Hazrat Zainab brings something that caused the people to be unconscious, that she herself was not able to bear. She brought the kurta, the shirt of Imam Hussein, the shirt that Imam was wearing on the plains of Karbala. And she put the blood-soaked shirt of Mawla Hussein on the cover of Rasulullah and says, Ya Rasulullah, the historians tell me that the grave of Rasulullah began to shake and it almost seemed like Rasulullah was extending his arms. Zainab, Zainab, your grandfather is here to take care of you. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Oh Allah, accept this ibadat from us. Forgive our sins and our shortcomings, Ya Allah. Give us the tawfiq to act on the teachings of the Quran and Majid and the Ahlul Bayt. Ya Allah, those who are ill, grant them shifa kamila from their illnesses. Those who are in debt, help them fulfill their debts. Ya Allah, protect our ulama, our maraj, and the mujtahideen, the resistance who are serving while the Imam is in occultation. Grant them long and healthy life and safety in the eyes of the oppression that is around them. Ya Allah, we ask you to return our Mawla Imam al-Hujjah to us. Make us amongst the Ashab and the Ansar of Imam al-Zamana, and let us see Zamana al-Dhuhur with our own eyes. Ya Allah, we want to let us join together and recite 5 times Amma Yajib for those who are ill, for Allah Ta'ala to give them shifa kamila, for our hajat to be accepted, for the hifazat of Imam Sahib al-Amr, and the safety and the security of those who are suffering in Iraq, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Gaza, in Palestine, in Yemen, in Nigeria, in Kashmir, in the occupied areas, in the places who are suffering under the sanctions in Lebanon and in Iran. For all of them, inshallah, all together 5 times. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul muttarra idha da'a wa yakshifu as-su. Amma yujibul idha da'a wa yakshifu as-su. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعا ويكشف السوء اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. Once again, I request a moment to recite Surah Fatiha for Marhum Muhammad Arafat Gandoor, the father of Dr. Rayhan Gandoor and his siblings. Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'een. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. صدق الله. ماتم حسين. يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين
يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين لبيك يا رسول الله لبيك يا حبيب الله لبيك يا رسول الله لبيك يا حبيب الله لبيك يا رسول الله لبيك يا حبيب الله لبيك يا رسول الله لبيك الله ماه شب تار غافل سالار دل بر و دلدار یا رسول الله ماه شب تار غافل سالار دل بر و دلدار یا رسول الله روح مناجات آینه ذات پیک سماوات یا رسول الله روح مناجات آینه ذات پیک سماوات یا دل به تبسم هایت دادم تا به تو دل دادم آزادم شد همه جان آمد فریادم یار مولانا یا رسول الله مولانا یا رسول الله سیدنا یا رسول الله مولانا یا رسول الله یا رسول الله سیدنا یا رسول الله مولانا یا رسول الله سیدنا سوره طه سید بطها هستی زهرا یا رسول الله سوره طه سید بطها هستی زهرا یا رسول الله رحمت رحمان بارش باران معنی قرآن یا رسول الله هستی زهرا یا رسول الله رحمت رحمان بارش باران معنی قرآن یا رسول الله تا شده مهرت سایه سارم در ره عشقت ره سپارم من ز تو دارم هرچه دارم یار مولانا یا رسول الله سیدنا یا رسول الله مولانا یا رسول الله سیدنا رسول الله مولانا یا رسول الله سیدنا الله مولانا یا رسول الله یا رسول الله سیدنا یا رسول الله یا حسن 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 کریم کاری به جز جود و کرم نداره آقام تو مدینه است ولی حرم نداره آقام تو مدینه است ولی حرم نداره غریب اونیه که همدم اشک و آه دیده که مادرش تو کوچه بی پناهه دیده که مادرش تو کوچه بی پناهه دلم تو روزه ها میشکنه مثل شیشه دلم تو روزه ها میشکنه مثل شیشه ولی روزی مثل روز حسین نمیشه ولی روزی مثل روز حسین نمیشه غریب اونیه که سر به بدن نداره آقام رو زمینه ولی کفن نداره آقام رو زمینه ولی کفن نداره آقام حسن حسن جان آقام حسن حسن جان. So inshallah you'll recite some quick poetry inshallah for the Imam Rada alayhi salam. You all know that these days in Mashhad everyone's heart is in Mashhad. ای صفای قلب زارم ای صفای قلب زارم هر چه دارم از تو دارم تا قیامت ای رضا جان سر ز خاکت بر ندارم منم خاک درت غلام و نوکرت مرا نزدر مرا به جان مادرت علی موسی رضا، علی موسی رضا، علی. MashaAllah, everyone. علی موسی رضا، علی موسی رضا، علی غیر تو یاری ندارم، با کسی کاری ندارم، گر مرا از در برانی جای دیگر من ندارم. تو خوبی من بدم، به این در آمدم، به جان فاطمه مکن مولا ردم. علی موسی رضا، علی علی رضا، علی موسی 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 رضا. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. One more time for all مرحومين. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين وعلى قلب زينب الصبور وعلى العباس جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجهم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم كل وليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة، وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طمعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. يا الله يا الله يا الله ويا الله يا 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 رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك واكفنا يا قاضي الحاجات ويا كافي المهمات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك على كل شيء قدير. رحم الله من يقرأ الفاتحة والإخلاص مع الصلوات.